All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about the most popular drink in the entire world, besides, water. But here's the thing, this is so much more than just a cozy cup of something warm. It's a wild story, packed with gods, spies, smugglers, and entire empires. This is the truly unbelievable history of tea. Just to give you a sense of the scale here, just look at this number. 5 billion. That's how many cups of tea are drunk every single day across the globe. It's more than just a drink, right? It's a global ritual. It's the centerpiece of social gatherings. And for billions of people, it's an absolute daily necessity. But this humble little plant, it has a shockingly dramatic past. I mean, the craving for these leaves, it has literally fueled wars, redrawn maps, and even brought down empires. So the big question is, how did we get from a simple leaf to all this? Okay, so our story kicks off, like a lot of great stories do, with a myth. But what you're about to see is that the popular legend about where tea comes from, well, it completely misses the most fascinating part of its real and, frankly, much weirder origin. So you've probably heard the story on the left. The demigod Shennong, the god of tea, accidentally discovers it when some leaves fall into his boiling water. Classic story. But the reality over on the right, so much cooler. For the first 2,000 years, people didn't drink tea at all. They ate it. That's right, they ate it. They had to ferment these tough, bitter leaves, packing them into bamboo tubes and burying them just to make them edible and get to the good stuff inside. And you know what's amazing? That history is still alive today. This is a perfect example. In Myanmar, the national dish is something called lepet thok, which is a salad made from fermented tea leaves. And the word itself, lepet, comes directly from la, which is one of the oldest words we know for the tea plant. It's a direct link to the past. So how does a fermented food turn into a cornerstone of philosophy? I mean, that's a huge leap, right? Well, the answer is all about a massive cultural shift in China that basically created an opening, a vacuum, for a whole new kind of social drink. See, as Buddhism started to sweep across Tang Dynasty China, it brought a major rule with it: no more alcohol. And this was a huge deal, because rice liquor was like the foundation of their entire social life. Suddenly, the whole country needed a new, non-alcoholic drink that people could share, and guess what was sitting right there ready to step in? Tea. It was in the perfect place at the perfect time. But it definitely wasn't a smooth transition. And that's where this guy, Lu Yu, comes in. He's the man who would eventually be called the god of tea. But get this, as an orphan in a monastery, his first taste of tea was this disgusting, soupy gruel. He said it tasted like ditch water. He absolutely hated it. Lu Yu's life was a total adventure. I mean, first, he escapes the monastery. Then he becomes a literal circus clown. But eventually, he finds his way back to tea, properly brewed tea this time, and he becomes obsessed. He spends the next 30 years studying it. The result was his book, The Classic of Tea, and it completely changed the game. It took tea from being just some bitter herb and turned it into this sophisticated art form. It became the perfect, mindful alternative to booze. So with tea now firmly established as this huge cultural force in China, it started to spread. When it went east, it got folded into these beautiful, sacred ceremonies. But when it went west, it became something totally different. It became a valuable commodity, something that could actually fuel armies. It was Buddhist monks who carried the tea culture over to Japan and Korea, and they both put their own unique spin on it. Japan developed this incredibly complex ceremony called chado, or the way of tea, focusing on powdered matcha and Zen principles from the samurai. Korea, on the other hand, went with darye, a much simpler, more natural ritual that was all about humility and being present. But over on China's other border, tea wasn't about peace and mindfulness at all. It was about war. You had this thing called the Tea Horse Road. Here, the Song dynasty traded just insane amounts of tea. We're talking 1.5 million kilos a year to Tibetan kingdoms. And what did they get in return? War horses. 25,000 of them to fight off the invading Mongol tribes. Tea had become a strategic resource, plain and simple. And here's a really cool little fact for you. What do you call this drink? Well, it all depends on how it first got to your part of the world. If it traveled over land from the Mandarin-speaking north of China, you probably call it cha or chai. But if it came by sea, carried by Hokkien traders from the south, you call it te. It's like a linguistic map that traces the ancient trade routes. Pretty neat, right? And now our story finally reaches Europe. This is where the demand for tea just spirals into a full-blown obsession. And this obsession, it's going to fuel a massive criminal underworld, it's going to spark a revolution, and it's going to lead the entire British Empire down a very, very dark path. It was just like a line of dominoes falling, one after another. First, the East India Company's monopoly makes tea outrageously expensive. So what happens? A massive smuggling enterprise pops up. To make up for their losses, the company taxes the American colonies, which, as you know, leads directly to the Boston Tea Party. But then Britain starts to run out of silver to pay China for all this tea. And that leads to the darkest, most infamous chapter in this entire story, the opium trade. This chart right here shows the problem perfectly. All of Britain's silver was flowing one way, to China, in exchange for tea. It created this huge trade imbalance. Their solution was, well, it was brutal, but it was effective. They started illegally trading opium, grown in their colony in India, for Chinese tea. They got millions of people addicted and violently reversed that flow of silver. And this is what led directly to the Opium Wars. Now, winning the Opium Wars gave Britain access to Chinese tea, sure, but it didn't give them control. And they wanted control. To really own the entire supply chain, they realized they were going to have to steal it. And that brings us to one of the boldest, most audacious acts of industrial espionage in all of history. The man for the job was a Scottish botanist turned spy named Robert Fortune. He went deep undercover, disguised himself as a Chinese official, and infiltrated China's forbidden, protected tea regions. He managed to learn their 1,000-year-old secrets, how they grew it, how they processed it. And then he smuggled over 20,000 plants and seeds right out of the country to start brand new plantations in British India. It was a heist of epic proportions. But while he was there, Fortune found something else, something shocking. He discovered that to make their green tea look prettier for the export market, Chinese producers were adding toxic chemicals, stuff like gypsum and even cyanide. So when he got back to London and exposed this whole poison scandal, the reputation of Chinese tea was completely shattered. Which, you have to admit, was pretty convenient, happening right as Britain's new plantations were just getting up and running. And just like that, the world of tea was changed forever. Huge plantations started popping up all across the British Empire, in India, in Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, and later in Kenya. This whole new industry was built on the backs of indentured servants who were forced to work in absolutely brutal conditions. And it worked. Britain went from being the biggest tea consumer to the world's dominant tea producer. This new era of mass production also kicked off a whole wave of innovation. And it all starts with something you might find surprising. English breakfast tea? It's actually an American invention. Yep, created by a tea merchant in New York City back in 1843. He was just trying to figure out what to do with a bunch of leftover black teas. Then you fast forward to the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis. It's a scorching hot day, and this poor tea merchant can't sell any of his hot tea. So he has this brilliant idea. What if I just pour it over ice? And boom, iced tea was an instant sensation, and it's been an American staple ever since. And of course, we have to talk about the tea bag, patented in 1901. The funny thing is, it was never meant to be used for brewing. It was just a clever way to send tea samples to customers. But people started just dunking the whole silk pouch into their cups, and well, a new kind of convenience was born. And the innovation just keeps on coming, right up to modern times. Back in the 1980s, a tea house in Taiwan decided to add chewy tapioca pearls to their iced tea. They created bubble tea, and it's exploded into this massive global phenomenon. It's really a symbol of modern tea culture today. So here we are, after 4,000 years of this incredible transformation, from a fermented food to a philosophy, from a tool of war to a symbol of peace, from sparking a revolution to being just a simple daily ritual. It really leaves you with one last question to think about. In a world that never stops changing, what on earth could possibly be next for tea?